So it's here. So perhaps we can do the following. This one, okay.
Because Lisa will have paper speech, I think.
Yes.
And so, let me just...
So you go here. Fast option. So I don't know, does it work? No.
Wait, do you have it open already? Downloaded?
No, I wanted to copy.
Yes, but is it already downloaded in the application, in the PowerPoint? Yes, maybe, yes, it is. So let's just
Yeah,
do
that's
like
what I
this.
did. You see?
Yeah, in principle it should be. Where is yours?
Principle?
Yes, so it's this one. And
Yes.
this is...
Okay. Here. Should be here.
See,
Okay.
Control V.
Yeah, see?
Okay, so maybe when it starts to me, I minimize this and I pull the other. What do you think? It's not the... I don't
If it
understand
is not
why.
possible, so there is a technician.
Wait. Let's try to see here doing... I know, it's not this one. Paste. List options. The server. Strange because it's properly selected, but I don't know. I don't know what's happening. Control copy.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Exactly. I saw
Let's
it.
try again.
I saw it. So paste. Think. Let's see. Paste. Oh, now it appeared a different thing. So,
But the order is the correct one.
let's. Oops.
The formatting, no, undo, because the formatting has changed.
It's
Undo.
let's. Where is the undo here? So how many slides you have? 18.
No, this is Ari. Okay, so it should be here. Yes.
Or we paste according to the source. There is another paste according to the source. Let me see. Keep
Okay.
source.
Yes.
Let's try. I think it's fine. Although it's a different...
No, but it's not. Just a second.
No, but it is fine.
Can you go up? Just to see whether...
Yeah.
Okay. So it should be working.
Let's just
Yes.
select the slides to see if there's nothing weird. Because I'm not going to detail this. See, but don't worry, but I...
No, it's just... Okay. So it works. Okay. You are so relaxed, Ari. I really invite you. I mean, I'm always stressed. Everything is not working. I mean, no. Eject. Okay. Indeed. Okay, I think we should start. So welcome everybody to this session, to the, let's say, closing plenary, Eiba Fellows plenary session. It's really an honor and a pleasure for me to chair this session today. As in the Eiba tradition, of course, the theme of the session that you can read on the slides is closely related to the theme, to the main theme of the conference. And so basically the challenges of European firms in the changing geopolitical landscape. Additionally, we have really the honor, and the pleasure to welcome our Eiba 2023 Honorary Fellow, Dr. Elisa Ferreira. And I take the opportunity to remind you that the induction ceremony will be held tonight, later at the gala dinner. Elisa Ferreira is European Commissioner for Cohesion Policy and Reforms. And we are very, very, very pleased and honored. She accepted our invitation to be our keynote speaker this afternoon. And yes. The other two panelists who kindly accepted my invitation to comment after Elisa's keynote, Ana Teresa Tavares from University of Porto and Arriva Nasce from HEC Montreal. Okay, so the structure of this session, as I already mentioned, we will have the keynote speech by Elisa, then the two commentators, and of course we will leave some room for Q&As from the audience. So thank you again, all of you, for being here, and of course thanks Elisa and the two panelists for being here with us. So I'm very pleased to call here Elisa, and thank you very much.
Can I switch it off? Can I put it like?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay. I can do it like this, no? You want to have it on? Okay, sorry. Otherwise I can see people. Well, thank you very much. And thank you very, very much indeed, Lucia. Thank you to my dear Ana Teresa. Thank you to Ari as well for being available and having spent the time to exchange and to follow up on my words now, on my short talk. And it is indeed, it is a great, great pleasure to be here today. It has been many years now, more years than I dare to count. But I have the best memories of this Eiba community, memories of our joint work, and memories of far-reaching discussions, memories of distinguished researchers, the late John Dunning, who was in fact my PhD supervisor. I had the immense pleasure to meet again Peter Buckley, who was my external examiner. Mark Hassan, I've been told that he's around. John Cantwell, Robert Reed. So, and in Portugal, the very, very pioneer researcher in the field, Vítor Corrado Simões, the dynamism, the very dynamic Ana Teresa Tavares, and so many others. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity. And in fact, some of them, with which I shared a lot of work, a lot of ideas, they are here today. Some of them are present through our memories. And I think it was Isaac Newton who said, if I have seen further, it is because I stood on the shoulders of giants. Many of those names I just mentioned, and many others, they are giants that enable us to see further. And I am delighted to see that you are still taking the discipline to new heights. And indeed, that new giants are emerging. So it is not just a pleasure to be here, it is above all a honor to be surrounded by such distinguished academics, and a deep honor to be made an honorary fellow. Thank you very, very much. In fact, my life has circled back. These last years, in particular, at the European level, I have returned to the fields that, both academically and professionally, occupied the first 15 years of my working life. Questions of balanced regional growth and development, productive investment, European integration, and the goal of economic, social, and territorial cohesion. I am committed to the idea that every European, no matter where these people live, should access similar opportunities. Such is the motto of the European Union's cohesion policy, which I'm responsible, and that I now have the pleasure to lead. Leave no one, no region behind. So, of course, I particularly welcome the increasing recognition by academia that we must combine the analysis of international business with that of regional development, because investment is attracted and anchored by specific spatial characteristics and what we call regional resources and regional endowments. And because regional development, in turn, is substantially driven by the location decisions of businesses and shape and distribution of national and international value chains. Now, be reassured, my intention is not, and I underline not, to present a piece of academic work. There are many in this room far more qualified now than me. But I hope, with my questions, to stimulate further fruitful discussions and, who knows, eventually some research. Because policymakers at every level should be conscious of the need to mobilize the help of the academy to fill our knowledge gaps. There is so much potential to massively improve the design both of our regional strategies, regional development strategies, and of our industrial policies. Filling knowledge gaps matters more than ever. Europe is at a critical juncture. Successive crises, from COVID to war in our borders, long-term challenges, in particular climate and the aging population, a fast-changing geopolitical environment, and the ambition to maintain Europe's technological edge, supported by the green and the digital revolutions. Plenty of challenges. Success of the trajectories set now and in the coming years will determine the long-term direction of Europe. So the world is not flat after all. To paraphrase Mark Twain, rumors of the death of geography have proven to be greatly exaggerated. Economic geography has been a significant growth field, particularly from Krugman onwards. There is a renewed understanding of the importance of place-sensitive policies. This is not just a theoretical issue. In Europe, significant disparities still exist in income and in productivity, although somehow natural between member states, given their different starting points. These disparities are all the more striking within member states. The 8th Cohesion Report, which the European Commission published in March last year, identified a wide number of territories that are stuck in regional development traps. These are less developed regions, but also some developed regions or regions that are at an intermediate level of development. All these types of reasons for different reasons, but all these regions, they are stuck. What I mean is that they are no longer growing or are growing well below the average of the European Union. And the report identifies a number of potential causes. Regional development traps seem to be linked to innovation capacity, or rather the lack of it, and the business ecosystem. Also, public administration and managerial capacity of the public sector, also these seem to be a constraint. We have been following up on that research, and in the new report published this year, that is, we called it Harnessing Talent in European Regions, we identified an additional trap, a skills trap, where the lack of skills makes a region unattractive to high-quality businesses, which in turn makes it difficult to retain skilled workers in the region. There is obviously a considerable overlap between regions in skills traps and those in development traps. But this same research shows that an estimate 30% of the European Union population live in regions that are stuck in such a skills trap. The disparities that result from all these traps are not only economically significant, but also politically significant. From an economic viewpoint, congestion in large cities may quickly transform the advantages of agglomeration into serious disadvantages. At the same time, small towns and rural areas, with their potentially higher quality of life, suffer from brain drain. And as the population diminishes and ages, public services become financial drains. All this is obviously and seriously suboptimal from an economic point of view, but it also correlates with rather toxic politics. Recent research into the so-called geography of discontent, I'm referring to the works of Pullman and Rodrigues Pose, among others, makes a convincing case for the link to regional disparities. The link is mild in the short term, but becomes quite striking in the case of long-term regional stagnation or decline. Regions in these situations often experience social and political disengagement or even revolt. Now, of course, as Tony Venables has rightly pointed out on various occasions, but also he came back to this topic in this year, it is a crucial question whether such disparities tend to be self-correcting or not. The need for public policy hinges on this question. And indeed, there are theoretical arguments in favor of self-correction, we all know them, but these optimistic assumptions of self-correction and automatic convergence fall at the first hurdle of the evidence, and at the second and third hurdles too, because the evidence is clear and quite consistent. In most cases, disparities are persistent, they are not self-corrective, and often they are on the opposite, self-reinforcing. This is why we are calling them traps. Convergence either does not happen at all, or it is very slow, lasting a generation or more, by which time the economic and political damage is done and the region has emptied out. And of course, as it always does, the literature has caught up, identifying several reasons for the absence of these rebalancing forces. The basic assumptions underlying our expectation of natural convergence do not withstand closer examination. Of course, we are referring among so many other factors, rigidities in factor prices, which combine with the actual determinants of company location decisions to create quasi-permanent spirals of imbalanced growth. This being a market failure, we are talking about externalities and provision of public goods, because as you know, location decisions are driven by perceived externalities, such as business networks and skills, or by public goods, such as the innovation ecosystem or the provision of public services. So the location of companies tends to be sticky, both in the sense that individual companies cannot change the equilibrium, and in that the result is that companies tend to cluster together. Although this leads to certain economies of scale linked to infrastructure or supply networks, there are also massive diseconomies of scale due to congestion, reflected in higher factor costs, especially real estate, higher levels of insecurity, lower environmental quality, and lower quality of life in general. Similar considerations apply to skilled workers in search of high-quality opportunities and careers. Whether in the private or public sector, they tend to move to congested areas. However frustrating they find housing costs, long commutes, or quality of life more generally. The result of all these individual decisions in some places and regions end up trapped in a long-term low-level equilibrium or even a declining path. The collective cost of this situation, not just the economic costs, but the social and political costs, calls for public policy measures. This is what regional development or cohesion policy is trying to do, involving by necessity many moving parts, many sectors, many stakeholders, and multiple levels of government. But behind all this complexity, at the core of regional development policy, there is a simple, crucial question. What must we do to correct imbalances in the location decision of firms? Because this is how we attract the jobs, innovations, the managerial techniques, and the economic dynamism. And this is how we break the development traps. In fact, there are two key dimensions to this issue, represented by two key words in the literature. One of them is attractiveness, and the other one is anchoring. Historically and conventionally, regional and cohesional policies have generally focused on attracting. This is based on the classic tools of infrastructure provision, incentives, and workforce skills. Indeed, as your own work has proven, these tools can be effective for attracting business, and such tools are still incredibly relevant in many places in Europe. However, the changing landscape of the modern economy, including the digital revolution, means that the basic needs are evolving. So further research should be appreciated on how regions can stay attractive in this changing landscape. Moreover, over the years, there has been a shift, a recognition that attraction is not enough. Policy practitioners have noticed this, and so have researchers, including so many of you. It is increasingly clear to everyone that we must go beyond simple attraction. We must also anchor business in the region, creating spillovers and deep links for the benefit of companies, for their suppliers and partners, and indeed for the benefit of the whole region. This requires new thinking and a new approach which takes account of the detailed characteristics and complexities of both regions on one side and firms, companies. In other words, regional policy is now a matchmaker looking for affinities between firm and region with the goal of increasing the quality of the match in view of a long and productive relationship. This symbiosis between regions and firms is confirmed, namely in a recent study supported by the European Commission and produced by Cassidy. The study shows that in the European Union, foreign direct investment is in three key value chains, namely automotive, textiles and clothing, and electronics, is highly regionalized, with a market concentration in highly specialized regions. These places often have a long tradition of production. They usually have a high concentration and dynamism of industrial activities. So we see clearly that the geography of the internationalization is in fact a geography of regional industrial specialization. And of course, you will already be thinking of John Dunning and its insightful holy paradigm. we are discussing here the capacity of a company to internalize the benefits arising from a key location advantage, tapping into specific region strength and links. This combines with a very specific key ownership advantage, which is the ability to seek out such regional capabilities. So the goal of all our policy funds and policy instruments should be to create self-reinforcing organic links between businesses and places. You can see this clearly in the European Union's cohesion policy's emphasis on what we have called smart specialization strategies. This is a clear attempt to match regions and companies, including foreign direct investment. Since 2010, cohesion investment support must be and should be preceded by a national or regional smart specialization strategy involving and engaging the relevant stakeholders across the innovation ecosystem. More than 10 years after the launch of this policy, 185 smart specialization strategies are in place across Europe. In preparing the plans, stakeholders are encouraged to reflect the complexity of the regional economy, from green and transport infrastructure to the provision of public services and quality of institutions. In other words, it is not just a question of finding good matches, but also of adapting the regions to the needs of the businesses that they want to attract and anchor. Less developed regions in particular may lack a sufficient launch pad for change. They often lack administrative capacity or an established business ecosystem, so capacity building is needed to build the profile of the regions. But in fact, developing a good strategy is not a trivial exercise. Among other contributors, Crescenzi and Arman start from the understanding that every global value chain is different to develop the argument that regions need to develop the right institutional and information bridges. It's about connectivity, it's about linkages, to maximize the value of that bridge and thus to share in the value created around the world. But managing this kind of complexity requires a broad and sophisticated bottom-up process, bringing together all stakeholders: industry, education, research institutions, public administration, civil society. This partnership is needed, not just to establish a local diagnosis of assets and needs, but also to set a strategic view for the future, including, in this view, the attraction of productive investment, national and foreign. But there are still so many gaps in our knowledge. Regions and policymakers need guidance. They need a roadmap to each sector and to each value chain, as well as what Crescenzi and Harmon describe as the crucial institutional and informational linkages necessary in each place, and I'm quoting, to connect the specific sectors and value chains. This information is complex and would benefit from extensive research, and you are the ones ideally placed to provide that roadmap. You are, in fact, going back to my initial words, the giants of knowledge. And in this field of knowledge, we are asking you to lend us your shoulders. Every day, regions across Europe take policy decisions, which should be better informed with your insights. So my appeal is for your contribution, helping to build a framework in which companies win and regions win, and thus create a win for Europe as a whole. Fewer and smaller regional disparities is better for our economies, for the well-being of our people, and for democracy. Your work has helped us and will continue helping us in achieving this goal. So thank you for this honor of being a keynote speaker today and of becoming a honorary fellow of the Eiba, of the European International Business Academy. I am sincerely, deeply touched. I feel privileged that I have had this wonderful opportunity to work with so many of you, and that after all these years, there is still so much we can do, blazing new sails and charting new territories. Congratulations to the Eiba, now close to its 5th birthday, and may many more follow. Thank you so, so much once again. Obrigada.
Para passar os slides. Não preciso mesmo. Quero ver o ecrã. Obrigada. Ok. Agora tenho que ir buscar a minha apresentação. Ai, já está. Obrigada. So, dear Elisa, dear Lucia, dear Ari, dear all, dear Vitor, Nuno, dear participants in this session, it is an immense pleasure for me. It's really a privilege to be here today on this fellows panel. I was really honored when Lucia contacted me, and you will see why. I will, if you allow me, I will make, because it's Elisa, a few, very quick personal notes. I can't avoid it. And then I'll also reflect on EU regional policy and international business on topics like, first of all, some key indicators, more macro, then some topics like innovation, clusters, smart specialization strategies, and lastly, FDI attraction and promotion of economic openness. It will be, of course, a very short intervention, and these themes are very rich, but then we can discuss further. So starting by a personal note. How special to be here today honoring Professor Elisa Ferreira. Elisa is an example, for me, personally, a mentor and a reference. I had the fortune of crossing her brilliant path way back in 1992 at FEP, University of Porto, where I also met Francisco. So we are all part of this cohort. So I remember those classes like if it was today. I have to say, maybe I never mentioned this so straightforward to you, Elisa. Your passion, your energetic and inspiring style really contaminated us. It was not only me, it was all of us. And you managed to convert an international trade class that could be quite boring. By the way, I didn't evolve much. I'm still teaching international trade, Adam Smith, Ricardo, etc., etc. But you managed to, after fulfilling the role of explaining all this to us, then you converted into a truly international business class. For me, this was an eye-opener. It was the first time I heard about FDI and multinational strategies and about Dunning, Cantwell, Buckley, Cass and Pierce and all the others. So, to be honest with you, I think I'm here today because of Elisa. Maybe I would never have heard of Reading in my life. Who knows? If I had a boring professor, just talking about Adam Smith and Ricardo and the likes, I would never probably have heard about Reading, about Eiba. My first Eiba was in '97, right in the year I started my PhD at Eiba. With Bob Pierce and Mark Hassan, and I was also a student of John, and I was also a lot in touch with Buckley. So it was a remarkable experience for me. But when I started listening to Elisa's enthusiasm about it, I said, this is really what I want to study. And then I went for a master's, and Elisa wrote me the endorsement letters, the support letters, and international business and economic integration. So I'm here today because of you, Elisa. Thank you so much. I want to express publicly my gratitude. So I stand the shoulders on this giant. Just a curiosity. This is a photo in Porto in 2010. Because if you know Elisa's CV, you know how perfect she is for this role and this responsibility. Elisa has been working in regional development. She was vice president of the Regional Development Agency and minister, so many important roles that cross all these topics that we are talking here. There's not a single of these topics that Elisa didn't have important responsibilities. So this photo is back when I was also vice president of that entity, so we have this lovely coincidence. And quite presciently, this was a session on Europe 2020, new strategy, new financing instruments towards a smart economy. So we spoke exactly about this that we were talking today, EU regional policy, funds. So thank you for bearing with my personal note. But I couldn't avoid it. Then I would like, because we are also in Portugal, to also speak about these topics with a special reference to the Portuguese case, and sometimes touching a little bit our northern region as well. So starting with a more macro approach, some key indicators. I'm drawing on public information, mainly from the EU Commission and other entities, and some papers. So in a sort of vol d'oiseau, a very quick overview, in the European Semester Country Report that was published 3 years ago, they had some overall numbers. It's quite hard sometimes to find the synthesis numbers, but it is estimated that from Portugal's adhesion to the then EC from 1986 to today, around 100 billions of euros were invested. There were enormous changes because I will try to mention some impressive impacts, some more direct, some more indirect, and also some difficulties. So I will follow that logic. So many development indicators that were impacted, infrastructural indicators, remarkable evolution of the enrollment, for example, in higher education, on lowering the rate of dropout in secondary school, etc., etc., etc. We were a very, very different country before we entered Europe. So cohesion policy really had a counter-cyclical role and provided considerable support, especially in bad economic times. And there are some remarkable numbers. For example, it is estimated in this report that from 30% in 2010, the share of the cohesion policy in public investment in Portugal reached 77% in the period 2014-18. This is incredible. So in Portugal, really, this is really the backbone of our public investment. It's been very important. So I'm not going through all these achievements. So for example, in the programming period finishing in 2013, there's a lot of indicators on firms, on transport infrastructure, on digital information and information society, on research. This was so heavily supported by EU funds. So if we didn't have this possibility, a lot of this wouldn't happen on education, research, on environment infrastructure, human capital, etc., social inclusion. This is also a variation on a theme that I already touched. This is the European Regional Development Fund and Cohesion Fund allocations in this period 2015-17, and also a percentage of general government capital expenditure. These authors, Prota et al., estimated to be around 60%. So depending on the time frame, it's really very, very impressive, the role that European regional policy had in some really important infrastructure in Portugal. When we look at the relevance of the transfers of regional policy and the respective funds in the regions in Europe, I think we cannot see very well, but my point here is that in these 3 programming periods that are mentioned, the North region of Portugal is the second biggest recipient, and it's really very impressive. Why am I mentioning this? I'm mentioning this because Elisa spoke about regional development traps. And our region, maybe unfortunately, is the model example one of the examples of a region that has some of the most amazing and sophisticated features, but at the same time does not really take off in terms of GDP per capita and other indicators. So it's a quite interesting case study. There was a study that evaluated in the Portugal 2020 program the impacts of the European structural investment funds on GDP in the period 2015 to 2073. And this was based in a model that estimated the percentage deviation with respect to no fund scenario. So in the programming period, which was 2014 to 2020, they estimated that there was a positive impact deviation of 1.3% on average in those years, and it would grow in the next 10 years to almost 1.6%. So a positive impact on GDP. When we look at the regions, they follow the same pattern, but in different magnitudes. And the islands of Açores and Madeira were more impacted, and then the third region was the north of Portugal. The impact on these regions was above the national average. Despite some of the important and positive contributions that are, remarkable, the fact is that when we compare Portugal to the European Union and the Portuguese regions, we still see some of the features that persist, like much lower GDP per head. So we've been a part of the cohesion policy for a long time. But for example, GDP per head is not really evolving in a very positive way. Sometimes it even declines vis-à-vis the European average. It represents about 3/4 of the European average. Productivity, we also have a productivity issue that is quite significant. And it's not only the magnitude, the absolute value, is also the sluggish growth in indicators like productivity and GDP per head. In terms of demography, it's a big challenge. I think it's our main challenge, in my opinion. Population growth is negative. It's quite a cause for concern. Then people in risk of poverty, social exclusion, but on the other hand, we have, of course, some positive elements, and it's remarkable, and this was in the governments that Elisa was with, also Professor Mariano Gago and other policymakers, that stimulated a lot the educational application of the funds. Before, like in the mid-80s, until mid-90s, there was a focus on infrastructure, especially road infrastructure, and then from the mid-90s onwards, there was a significant investment in education. And the European funds really supported this, and we need to be very grateful for that. In terms of R&D expenditure, we are still below the European average, although there are very positive developments. Companies are investing more than before. There's a lot of very interesting and important projects that were funded also by EU regional policy with critical mass, like the I3S Health Institute in Porto, like the one in Braga in Nanotech, like several others here in Lisbon and throughout the country. So, detailing a little bit more, although I'm not going to be very, very thorough, on this characterization, a bit of these features also of the North region. And towards the end, I'll be more addressing FDI and other things, because we also had some considerable successes. But the north of Portugal being the most populous, and it's the most industrialized region in Portugal, and one of the most industrialized in Europe, and it's the leading exporter of goods in Portugal. There was a very different. Now there was a recent evolution in terms of the profile of exports. For example, now the most exported sectors are in the automotive and the machinery. It's quite a lot of sophisticated goods being exported, more services than before, but still, of course, goods dominate. I would stress the excellence in science and technology, which really have some world-class representatives there. And all this has been really very strongly, and majority of the investment was really due to European regional policy. In terms of innovation, It's been, the north of Portugal was the Portuguese region that increased the most in terms of the Global Innovation Index. And then we in 2019, we achieved the status of strong innovator. Unfortunately, in 2021, we went back to being a moderate innovator, but this is the state of the art overall. But still, we really cannot did not manage to escape this trap, this growth trap, development trap. And this is a puzzle that we still have. There's a lot of discussion in Portugal about that, about institutions, about centralization versus decentralization, etc. So we are still beneficiaries of cohesion funding. Yes, we accept some parts of Portugal, like the area of Lisbon and the Algarve. And this is the sort of the big picture, and this is how GDP per capita in Portuguese regions has evolved since 2000 until 2021. So in this case, it's not a brilliant sort of snapshot. In terms of demographic challenges, this situation is not easy at all, which has repercussions on also the skills and talent trap that Elisa mentioned. But, this is not a presentation to make us depressed. It's just to highlight the dichotomies sometimes that we have, and so important macro impact of the funds, important support to several initiatives. Let me now zoom a little bit on innovation and competitiveness and on the attraction of foreign direct investment. So here, when we look at this, the picture is far more positive. Those of us who knew Portugal, like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, understand that we are very different, and we understand the importance of being a part of the European Union and of being beneficiaries of regional policy. So in terms of the RCI 2.0 index change between 2016 and 22, there was a very positive evolution in Portugal. We are still on the way, but really it's been really instrumental to benefit from regional policy. And I think we understood in Portugal as a whole and in the regions that we need really to support innovation. In terms of the North region, the innovation scoreboard highlights some strong points and some weak points. We still need to improve our investment in corporate R&D, but we are on the way. There's a very positive trend towards that. The qualification of human resources that has been traditionally low, it's really improving a lot, and it's been one of the main reasons of attraction of very high quality investments into the region. And then there remain productivity challenges. However, the industrial fabric we have now, or the sectoral fabric at large, and also the types of investments, both Portuguese owned and foreign owned, are of a much better profile than before. So touching upon also a topic that was mentioned in Elisa's speech, the smart specialization strategies. For example, in the north, there's been but also in other regions, a promotion of clusters. And this has been very much supported also by European funds. For example, in the north, like health and life sciences had really a tremendous boost. Agro-industry as well, for example. One that is really taking off very slowly is the sea resources and sea economy. But I don't want to dwell into this, but also cluster policy has been very much supported by European regional policy. In terms of FDI attraction, this is an area that I've been working a lot in the last 20 years in Portugal. And it's really remarkable how important has been, and it's not surprising, of course, the membership of the European Union. And even I mentioned here a study by Bruno Campos and Estrin in the Journal of Common Market Studies on the effect of on FDI of membership in the European Union. And their research question was how much additional FDI does a country receive because it chooses to engage in deep economic integration like belonging to EU. And they calculated that EU membership increases FDI inflows by between 60 and 85%, and around 50% for intra-EU investment. And they support the strong importance of the single market. So I'm about to finish with some notes on FDI attraction, also with a note on the Portuguese case. Here the evidence is not very organized, so I have this slide and another one, and the other slide I gathered, by hand in a list in an Excel that I got some support to some projects. But EU funds, I see it in a holistic way. It's not just the support, direct support to companies. Way more important than that is the broad picture. So EU funds helped strengthening relevant FDI determinants in many ways. I think for what I speak to investors, and I've been involved in about 400 investment projects since 2002, the education and skills of the population was by far the most important area of impact. For example, in Investport, 3 years between 2014 and 17, we got in touch with, it was 154 projects that were implemented, and this was by far the key factor. Much better quality investments. The attractiveness of the region, of the location, was due to the availability of skilled workforce. The biggest reason. R&D centers as well. Interface, we had several programs funded by the EU, Interface program, the Clusters program, linking universities and R&D centers. This is not always an easy dialogue, but it improved a lot. And there are some very, very good examples of that. Several dimensions of the well-being of population and quality of life have been also very important. And more recently, the support to companies, networks, digitalization, decarbonization, etc. Then, more narrowly on FDI incentives, different grants were also relevant, but I would say this is secondary to the first more macro, like education, etc. Also on promotion of exports, entrepreneurship, so this all increased the overall openness of our economy and the more cosmopolitan sort of nature and higher quality of our exports. So these are, I don't know if you can see, but these are the main beneficiaries of in terms of foreign and national investment projects, because I put a mix, like some foreign investors that are very relevant. Bosch, Car Multimedia, Renault, Embraer, Continental, Mabor, Hanan Systems. So Bosch, for example, is very interesting. With the University of Minho, they have the biggest project of interaction between a company and universities, over 60 million supported by EU regional policy. So we also have some very interesting and innovative, we even have a tissue company, Renova, that has been strongly supported, and is a world-class case study, like imagine toilet paper as you've never seen before. But also startups that are trying to thrive in the market, like Blue Pharma and others. So in all, and to finish, EU regional policy had a very relevant impact in promoting GDP growth, cluster development, innovation capabilities, upskilling, reskilling, FDI attraction. Very positive, tremendous influence. However, development traps persist. How to solve this, Elisa? I don't know, but we keep on working. Thank you.
So it's a real honor to share this panel with Dr. Ferreira, who's not only the European Commissioner for Cohesion and Reforms, but also a member of the Commissioners Group of the European Green Deal. It is difficult to understate the role that Dr. Ferreira plays in the European policy space. Cohesion policy is Europe's main strategic tool to strengthen economic, social, and territorial cohesion among EU countries. As Europe's main investment policy, which is responsible for 1/3 of the EU budget, it plays a pivotal role in ensuring that Europe goes through a digital transition, a clean energy transition, but doing so in a way that no community or region is left behind. And of course, this issue will become only more important as we've recently seen in the COP28 that there is a decision to phase out fossil fuels where Europe has been playing a leading role. So the main point that I would like to make in my presentation is something that you actually already mentioned in your opening remarks, and that is that international business scholars can and should do much more to help Dr. Ferreira develop an effective EU cohesion policy. We have all the tools to do so. We have a solid understanding how multinational firms and global value chains decide what to produce, where to produce, with who to produce, and under what conditions to do so. We also master the state-of-the-art theories and techniques that are necessary to analyze how policies influence these what, where, and how decisions of multinational firms. And so these are exactly the types of skills and insights that Dr. Ferreira is looking for as you're trying to examine to determine what policies to put into place, and also to expose to make sure that what you're promising is also being put into place as well. So what I would like to do is try to demonstrate a number of areas where international business scholars could play a role. And I'll do this by starting off with the way that Valentina De Marchi and I define international business policy, and then demonstrate how actually it leads to a number of research themes that are really important. So the way that we interpret international business policy is that it is the mix of actions that public authorities, and this can be at the local, regional, national, international level, take to shape or alter cross-border business transactions with the goal of addressing public policy challenges. Okay, so this is a mouthful of words, but it's quite easy to see with the figure over here. The European Commission cares about a lot of policy priorities, but one of them is economic, social, and territorial disparity. There is, as we heard in the opening remarks and also in the remarks of Anna, a clear indication that international business matters, either in creating some of these disparities, but also solving some of these disparities. And so policymakers, as they're looking at what tools to put into place, they're going to try and find those tools that can change international business in order to address these public policy challenges. Okay, so what are the three areas that I think that actually international business scholars can really have a big contribution? The first one is the simple identification that indeed international business has a clear link with economic, social, and territorial disparity. We already know that this is the case, theoretically, but certainly we have to do more about that. We know that international business is a main mechanism that ensures that locations can specialize. And specialization is really great because it ensures that we can do more with the resources we have. We can increase our productivity. This can create economic growth. But the winners and the losers are not, so all locations are not going to be winning with the same amount. So just to give an indication with two figures here, in this conference here, we have John Cantwell sitting in the back, but we had Bo Nielsen, and we've had other scholars that have been doing work on global cities. And so one thing that has become very clear is that in the period of globalization, global cities in developed countries have been winning a lot. And the reason is because they specialize in intangible activities that are getting a big share of the value. Right? And in fact, actually, what international business scholars have shown is that these global cities not only are winning through specialization, but if they then also create global connectedness to other locations, then this will even more increase their gains that they're getting. One thing that international business scholars have maybe not paid as much attention to is that while there are some locations that win a lot, there are other locations that are not always winning, in fact, actually losing. And there's been a very influential economics literature by David Autor and by Gordon Hanson and David Dorn that have been working on the China shock, which have shown that in the United States, those counties that are facing a lot of competition from China, the moment that these factories close, what happens is that people lose their job and they have a very difficult time finding a different job. So what happens is that they not only lose temporarily their income, they permanently, their permanent lifetime income goes down. These people are more likely to end up on social welfare. They're more likely to become disabled. They're more likely to become drug addicts, more likely to become alcoholics. In fact, actually also, they're less likely to get married. In fact, actually also their children are being affected by this. So this is just a real indication of why actually this economic, social, and territorial disparity really matters. Now, it's easy to kind of say, well, okay, now we know that some cities are winning and others are losing, so therefore, in these losing cities, international business is kind of a bad thing. But this is not true either. And this is, again, what Dr. Ferreira has been pointing out. In order to get these locations to reinvent themselves, they need to have more investment. But these locations are really poor. They're not going to get investment locally. They have to have multinational firms coming in. So again, here we're seeing that international business is at the center of what cohesion policy and reforms really is about. Now, another thing that Dr. Ferreira indicated was that they're spending a lot of time thinking about how the digital revolution and how the clean energy transition matter for cohesion policy and reforms. And let me just give you one example here of a tweet by Gordon Hanson of why actually this matters. Okay, so Gordon Hanson is an economist at Harvard that was also involved with the China shock, but he wrote a tweet saying, "Let us hope that the decline of coal isn't a preview of the energy transition. Since 1980, coal counties have lost 200,000 mining jobs, had income per capita fall to 62% of US level, and seen Medicare and Medicaid benefits rise to 14% of personal income." Okay? Now, we can understand how this works. When we have a clean energy transition, what happens is that we are pushing demand of coal and other fossil fuels to drop. Locations specializing into that are negatively affected, and we're pushing demand for other energy sources to increase, and these locations are gaining. Right? So all the issues of specialization that we talked about before are really at the center of this. So just to give an indication, I'm doing some work with Milad Shirvani, who's a PhD student at Ca' Foscarim, and with Ekaterina Turkina at HEC Montreal, where we are looking at the car manufacturing industry, which is really going through significant disturbances. So what is happening in the car industry is that most developed countries have decided that by 2030, 2035, they will no longer sell internal combustion cars. So you've got all these automotive manufacturers that have created a very strong competitive advantage in these internal combustion cars that are left scrambling to find out how to radically reinvent themselves. So how do they do that? Well, in the study that we're doing, we're looking at how actually this phase out of internal combustion cars is leading to a change in the geography of innovation. And of course, what we're finding is that these car manufacturers are reducing the amount of innovation in these sunset locations that are specializing in the old technology. And there you're seeing a rapid shift towards innovation in locations that are very strong in this sunrise technology. So the same mechanism that we were talking about before now again is happening. And so it's really important what the Cohesion Policy and Reforms Division is doing in this regard. I'll just go back to the figure and I'll focus on another arrow that I've got here. This is between public policy actions and international business. So once we're convinced that international business really matters for dealing with economic, social, and territorial disparity, we have to find out what the policies are that can change international business in the best way to address these issues. And we heard from Dr. Ferreira that this is not easy to do. Yes, and Anna talked about it as well, we need to be attracting firms to come, but simply attracting firms to come is not enough. Axel, who's sitting in the back, she was talking about this earlier as well. I mean, you can attract them, but if they're not creating linkages with other local firms, then they're not anchoring. And if they're not anchoring, then there's not going to be the revival of the location that is required for this cohesion to set into motion. So we need to be thinking very carefully about this. And this here is where international business scholars can probably be the most useful. One thing that we've heard throughout this conference, we had it yesterday with Alain Verbeke and with other people, and Peter Buckley talked about this as well, is in order for good policy to put into place, we need to know how multinational firms are going to react. If we don't know how they're going to react, we're going to get unintended consequences that might lead to very different outcomes. And so this is maybe bad for addressing the policies, but it also addresses or reduces the legitimacy of what Dr. Ferreira is doing, right? So we have to be thinking about this very carefully. What I've been pointing out in my own work is that as we're thinking about this, it is important to not just focus on one policy, but probably a cocktail of policies. In my own work, which was more about trying to strengthen intangible activities in a location, I talk about the ABC of place-based policies. The A stands for attractiveness policies, attracting firms, attracting people. You talked about a skills deficit, so this is very important. The B stands for buzz policies. You want to anchor that firm, make sure that there are spillovers with other firms. You have to create interactions with each other. And then the third one, which is really important, but is probably especially difficult for locations that are disadvantaged, is these firms that are coming, they need to be linking with the local firms, but then these local firms need to be reconnecting to the global system, because one of the problems with backward locations is that most of the time they're actually getting disconnected. It's not international business that is kind of creating the downfall, it is the pulling away of international business that is generating this. So connectedness policies are really policies to link with other locations. Other things that are important is the policy-making process. We need to be understanding how we can get multinational firms who are really investing much more right now into contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals. Can we get them to help promote cohesion policies? I think that this is really important. But thinking about this policy process is something also that international business scholars should be doing more and are already doing more. And I'll give you one example of why actually this matters. And so this comes from an article from Rodriguez Pose, who you also mentioned before. So what this article actually has been doing is looking at whether or not cohesion policy investments has an influence on how countries and locations are looking at anti-EU vote or populism, etc. And they actually find significant evidence that having more investment into cohesion, into addressing these disparities, leads to a reduction in anti-EU votes. So what this means is that suddenly one goal that we had before, which was getting rid of disparities, might actually be another goal of trying to make sure that the benefits that a more integrated system keeps on being maintained, which is something that is certainly a worry in countries like Holland and other locations right now. So this is my last slide here. So I've got kind of a fourth angle. Ultimately, what Dr. Ferreira asked in the beginning was, please, international business scholars at Eiba, try to help us determine effective policies that can shape or alter international business in order to address economic, social, and territorial disparities. We have all the elements to do so, but we already have emerging research themes in these areas. And so I would just kind of say, let's all try to get together and do more work in this area. I'll leave it here.
React to...
Well, I would just like to thank very, very much both commentators, because in fact, I think we came together. Of course, a special word of thanks to the nice messages that have a personal, as she said, personal nature, but I will have a chance to thank her privately. But I think the best reward a teacher may have is in fact to see the ex-students going further, much further than what the teacher was at a certain time, and at least to have recognition that certain seeds for future work were in fact transmitted. So I want to thank her for this personal note. But on the substance of what I was trying to share, I feel very comfortable with the two interventions, and I thank you for that. Because in fact, immediately I could see that I have some hope that you, the researchers, will help us in fact doing this kind of matching between all the public work that Ari was referring to, of a legislative nature, but also because cohesion policy has got to adapt to changing times. And so it is also true that when in Europe you decide to say, okay, let's do green and let's do digital, if the policy doesn't come in to correct the impacts, we may end up with massive divergences in what is happening. This is why we have established a special Just Transition Fund for coal regions, but of course we cannot have a special fund for all the transitions that will be happening, like the car industry. On the other hand, it is true that, naturally, the choice of multinationals go in response to the best visible offers that are made on the ground. So if we look at innovation, innovation is 9 times higher in the developed regions than in the backward regions on average. So of course, if the policy is not there to offer, then imbalances will go on, and the end result is this one. The same thing with globalization. So I usually say that whatever the horizontal policy we are doing, it has asymmetric impacts on the different regions. And so we have got at least to be aware of this, because the cost of this is much high, even when progress was done with funds in the basic conditions. And I thank Ana Teresa also for having referred to this, because if you look at the maps that she has shown, some of them are coming exactly from the 8th Cohesion Report. You look at backward regions in Europe, and you have the old supported regions, in which you include Greece, you include southern Italy, you include most of Portugal, and a substantial part of Spain. And you look at the eastern part, and the map that she has shown shows a low level of development. But whereas in the eastern part, the growth, that was the map on the right side, the growth of those areas is absolutely amazing. In the southern and western part of Europe, the growth, the economic growth is very, very stagnant, and it is stagnant for ages, or at least, once you have solved the basic infrastructural problems, then when you go into attracting the right businesses, attracting the right value-added activities, is much more difficult. And that's where I'm calling for your technical support and research effort, because in fact we need to fine-tune the policies so that they actually match the choices of investors and multinational companies, and that they gain roots. For some time, multinationals were supported with cohesion policy. Then we realized that it was a fight for multinationals and the competition among support and subsidies. So the support became only available for small and medium companies. Now we are making an experiment and we'll see what the Council will decide very soon, probably in January, on a STEP proposal. We called it STEP. In fact, for strategic industries that relate to net zero, that relate to high technology, to be also potentially supported by cohesion funding as on top of all the natural incentives to locate in developed areas, also the state aid possibility was opened in Europe to attract these industries. And so the countries that have deep pockets, or the regions that have deep pockets, they are in fact offering something for which the weakest regions cannot. But I mean, to avoid the Bedouin tent effect, a lot more has got to be done. Also because the frustration goes in the sense that when we do, and we are campaigning all the time in favor of qualification and education, and in particular, Ana Teresa mentioned it very clearly, and the progress is immense, but on the other hand, we are faced with massive brain drain because there is a mismatch between the offer and the supply and demand of qualifications, and this is in fact frustrating a lot of families that have invested a lot in the next generation to be able to have a better life. And for the first time, the next generation is not, I mean, definitely benefiting from the same conditions of the previous one, and this is very frustrating for a lot of families, and this creates a lot of discontent with everything. Of course, globalization, but of course, greening, of course, transition, because this is on top of wars in our borders, of pandemics, and so people end up aligning with whoever offers the protection in relation to, and they ask very little on the content of this agenda of protection and safeguard. So in fact, this is what the transitions also imply, but the challenges are not just for policymakers, they are for all of us. And in fact, I end up thanking you for your interest, for your reaction, and I hope we keep in touch, because this is really vital, I think, it's not for Europe, but I think it's for the democratic agenda, I think, on which we're building our economy.
Thank you very much. So I think we have still 10 minutes for gathering questions. And so, Igor, you want to introduce yourself? And no, it doesn't work. Doesn't seem to be.
Okay, yeah, you can hear me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commissioner. And not for me also Commissioner, for the others maybe just Professor and Doctor. Yesterday we had a session with Dari on a panel on the role of institutions in international business and how to promote innovation and internationalization. And one thing that came to my mind when I thought about the strategies that European Union has vis-à-vis trade and foreign policy, we have always done free trade agreements, and the goal was basically to have free access for our companies to sell abroad. But really, European Union is not really promoting foreign direct investments inward. So we have done a great job integrating Germany and France. Maybe to a certain extent, because of the connectivity of the businesses around the world, we are not in open war with Russia, because it depends. So this idea that is on the basis of the European Union, but also to help the cohesion policies, and also to become more independent strategically, shouldn't we make also European economy more integrated in the world supply chain. So attracting, if Chinese are better in doing solar panels, why not having them establish the companies here and then copy from them? Because the entrepreneurs will do that. I mean, that's what the entrepreneurs do all the time.
Thank you, Igor. Should we gather perhaps? Okay, Igor.
Yeah, I have a question regarding these, let's say, tipping points, or when virtuous circles turn into vicious ones, and the other way around, because we seem to be stuck in these traps. So the question is about the psychology of people in these regions, how that matters. Have you seen any good work on that? Are there any measures taken to try to get at the psychology of people? Because if there's no hope, the traps are deep. And the question is, are we working on that? Do we understand what is actually going on when the circles turn vicious?
What would be the implications of a possible entrance of Ukraine on the cohesion policy? Because the cynicals of Brussels are deciding maybe something, and what would be your opinion on that?
We got a last question, perhaps, is around that. Okay.
Yes, just wondering about the European Green Deal and everything that is related to the dominant discourse in Europe figured around climate change and the climate crisis, whereas I interpret the most important immediate crisis is the cost of living crisis that gets sort of outcompeted by climate issues, which are of course important, but nevertheless are creating a completely different discourse. And cohesion fund, of course, should address those cost of living crises more. But is it possible to do that when the European Commission is so much in favor of the Green Deal?
Okay, so perhaps we can...
Yeah. Well, I'll try to reply to very, very complex questions and difficult ones. From Igor, yeah, I think that is, I mean, that is a big question. What is trade policy in Europe? I mean, and the external policy, what is it aiming at? It's a broad question, as you know. I mean, as you were putting the question, I was remembering a previous discussion I had in my past time with Commissioner Mendelssohn, that was in fact in charge of trade. And I was a member of parliament, and I remember telling him, look, you are opening the borders of Europe, the industrial borders of Europe, to imports from China that are based on subsidy and on the devaluation of the currency. And he answered to me, and it was in public, so I can repeat. He answered to me, look, lady, if we get our member of parliament, if we manage to get 1% of the new Chinese market for banking or insurance, how many airplanes of T-shirts do you think this is worth? I mean, it's, and also, I mean, it's, I was, when we were doing, and I just answered to you with concrete examples. And also when I was in Parliament, I mean, there was a proposal from the Commission to establish REACH and a lot of other codes of conduct for companies. And at one point in the Parliament, we made an amendment, a proposal, that if a company was certified as being green, and as complying with also all the labor rights and social responsibilities, that in fact these companies should comply with the same standards in all the operations outside. So in subcontracted companies and also in subsidiaries. And of course it was completely outvoted. So, I mean, business is business, and then so that's the role of policy and the role of, and the pressure and the trade-offs. And in fact, I mean, China is faced with a lot of pressure to create jobs, and to create jobs that, I mean, avoiding to discuss more long-term strategies, but they have to create jobs. And when we in the European Parliament visited China a long time ago already, I had a chance to speak with the governor of the central bank, and we asked them, do you think, I mean, you are a member of the World Trade, so how do you think we can live with the permanent devaluation of the currency, which is not a good practice? And the answer was, I'm told to provide and to help to create, I don't know how many jobs per year, so that's my duty. I mean, I'm sorry about it. I mean, that's life. So in fact, I mean, this is how life goes. Then when you asked me about psychology, yes, it's psychology, but it's how you can make psychology go against what you see every day. Because you see a lot of regions across Europe losing their best, becoming very abandoned and old. Also, it becomes a very important cost when you have the whole Europe getting very, very old. We were discussing with Lars a couple of minutes ago, we were discussing, I mean, the future of Europe, also because the young generation doesn't have the conditions, even if they want, to have children, because the cost of a child is immense, and the jobs don't pay. And so it's becoming, we are losing the energy, the renovation of our generations. But in fact, it's very difficult to combat this trend. We are expecting to have less 35 million active age population in 2050. So it's massive, the loss. For instance, when I visit just transition areas, these areas of coal that are in fact losing a lot of jobs because they are in a transition that would occur anyway, because when I visit Silesia, for instance, in Katowice, they were telling me, well, we started losing jobs in the 90s, but at that time there was no support. Now what we are trying is to manage the transition. It is not easy to find new activities that can absorb, even if we are prepared to pay the training and retraining and attraction of companies to these areas. But in certain cases, you see hope, and you see young people wanting to do fantastic things there. And I visited, for instance, and Francisco was with me, in Jiu Valley in Romania. I mean, the ex-miners, I mean, the miners of a closed mine, they became touristic guides. And so it was absolutely amazing to visit the old mines and to listen to them telling us how a disaster happened, how they used to work in the mine, how was the life. It was really absolutely amazing. And so you see, if you have also universities in the area, often the background, the industrial, hard-working background is a good asset for other industrial activities, such as, I mean, on the area of the electricity, on the area of logistics. So it can really occur, but it's not easy, and it cannot be left to the natural trends. Then on Ukraine, that is the biggest question, I mean, that nobody really knows how to answer now for time being. We are, in fact, proposing to the community, including to you, suggestions on how to revise, how to improve cohesion policy. In fact, Rodrigo Esposo is chairing the group, a group of academic people, of ex-politicians that are free. They are participating on their own capacity. And it is very interesting, but we are trying to improve the policy, as we say in French, à traité constant, without including enlargement. Because for enlargement, we need to reassess a lot of things. We need to reassess the budget, because the budget of Europe is 1% of the overall wealth. It's very, very small. We need to analyze the institutional organization of how we vote, how we decide, when instead of being 27, that is already difficult, we'll be 35 or so. So, I mean, this introduces major changes. But of course, for the time being, what we are trying to do is kind of analyze the different chapters that need to be approached, and in particular to put up front a lot of elements, like making sure there is no fraud, that there is respect of the law, that the institutions work adequately, rather than leaving it for later, and eventually analyzing in certain policies some support, namely for reconstruction. I would just underline that every time that Europe enlarged, cohesion policy was reinforced. And if you look at the different phases in the life of Europe, this is how we managed. And in fact, when Poland joined, for instance, there was this, particularly in Britain, there was this Polish plumber syndrome. Now there is no Polish plumber syndrome, because as Poland, and I speak about Poland, but any other country, start growing, people start staying because they don't have this strength to go. And cohesion policy is not just good for those that benefit directly from it. Because speaking of our past here in Portugal, for instance, all the investment done in sewage or in water supply or in treatment of waste, it was in the beginning, the first investments were, just benefited. They were supplied by Thames Water, by Aguas de Barcelona, by the French companies, by Italian companies. So this was the first impulse, but then it develops. Also in Poland, and I used to invite, when I was in the parliament, I used to invite students, and I invited a colleague from Poland to come and speak to these students. What do you think, openly, what do you think of Portugal? And he said, well, great. We are always very self-critical of ourselves in Portugal. But he came and he said, oh, great country. And I said, he's joking, cannot be possible. But yes, he came, great country. Why? Because you have the best diplomatic services, because you have the Lisbon agenda, you have a president of the Commission that is Portuguese, then later on the Secretary General of the United Nations, but at that time it was not the case yet. And so very diplomatic, best diplomatic services, but then at that time the biggest bank is Portuguese, that was Millennium. In Poland, the biggest, here we can say the names, I think, yeah? Okay. The most important distributor of food and is Bierdronka, that is Jerónimo Martins, and the biggest construction company is Motte Companhia, that is so fantastic. So this to say that when a market opens and starts reconstructing itself or building and using funds, this benefits the internal market in Europe. It benefits everybody. So our estimates were that 1/3 was the direct benefit of so-called net payers, but then the indirect effects, as you know, are difficult to calculate, but they exist and they are substantial. Apart from stability, apart from enlarging the market and all this. So I think cohesion policy is really the other side of the internal market, because if we don't support, then it cannot work. And in fact, the countries of the last enlargement, they had an average when they joined 53% of European GDP per capita. Now they are all over 75%. So it is in fact something very, I said the average of all of them is 75%, and a lot of them are already in the 80-something%. On the Green Deal, that is the question. Yes, it is. I think we have got to be careful with the Green Deal because, I mean, of course, Europe, not in terms of the core message, also the expectation that Europe will be able to build on this agenda a kind of front-running competitive advantage. But in fact, when we apply it here and there, we have got to be capable of shaping it, because when we move from a law and from theory and broad messages that we are completely interested in keeping going, but when we apply it, when we deliver, we have got to fine-tune and to see that we don't send the baby with the bathwater and that we don't end up with massive drama. But that's what we are trying to do by supporting, in fact, this adaptation, because cohesion policy, 1/3, I mean, it is 1/3 of the budget, of the European budget, but also 30% of the investments that are supported have got to be directed towards, in fact, helping this transition. So when you support a company, you expect that this funding will be used, in fact, to help this company to reshape its production process. And in this year, the impact of all these supports, together with international managing, has been remarkable in terms of reducing the dependence, namely of Russian fossil fuels. So, in fact, sometimes we see how working together can really do a lot. So in saving, in supporting renewable energy, in also diversifying the sources, also in buying together in the world market. In fact, the cost and the percentage, the impact of fossil fuels and the increase of cost of fossil fuels in the average of European countries has been substantially reduced. And so there are advantages, but of course we have got to keep going in the innovative and also managing this transition, bearing in mind the concrete impact of the agenda on the different economic and social structures. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. So we would, of course, like to go on with this exciting discussion, but I'm afraid we are already a bit late. So, of course, I'm going to thank Elisa Ferreira, the two panelists, so Anna Teresa and Ari, and all of you, of course. And now, time to get ready for the gala dinner. Okay.